On today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, we're back talking the rest of the draft picks for the Houston Texans. Sarge has a gold mine. While everybody else was kind of confused, he likes the player and the future potential he'll have on this roster.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome back to the Locked On Texan podcast. We are here to continue our draft coverage. The picks are in, everything is solidified, and I can't wait to talk about all of the undrafted rookies that the Houston Texans have brought in. But we are your Texans Credential Media members. I'm John Hickman, and that is Brian Big Sars Badfield. The setup ain't the same right now. He's on the West Coast covering the Houston Rockets as they get ready to take on the Golden State Warriors, but you guys are here to talk Texans, and that's what we will do. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we dive into what is the next step for General Manager Nick Caserio, and also we may need to look at, if not today, the next step for DeMeco Ryans as he goes into year 3. We give our overall Texans draft day draft grades for over the weekend, but we open up today's show with finding gold on day 3 and finishing our coverage of the NFL draft for the Houston Texans. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada draft pick of the week later in today's show. Big Sarge, you are on mute, kind of like the New Orleans Saints have been throughout that draft in terms of picking a quality quarterback. They were quiet. They were on mute. They went the opposite direction. So I know you got a shot to kill him more, but Big Sarge, what's going on?
Greetings and salutations, John Hickman. I hope I'm unmuted right now.
You are unmuted. We hear you loud and clear. Now it's time to dive into the Houston Texans. On the show that I used to kick off this week's podcast, I talked about Jaylen Higgins, Ariante Asiri, and Jaylen Noel. The first 3 picks for the Houston Texans. And then Houston, they got a little busy, right? Trading up, trading down, moving around the draft board. Cornerback out of USC, Jalen Smith, and they doubled up on USC players right after that with running back Woody Marks, right? He had over 1,100 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns his last season at USC, over 1,500 receiving yards for his career. They also drafted safety Jaylen Reed out of Penn State, quarterback Graham Mertz out of Florida, D tackle Keontae Hamilton out of Rutgers, and tight end out of Iowa, Luke Lakey. We didn't get an opportunity to talk about the first 3 draft picks, so this is where we kick it off, Sarge. In your opinion, when I just named the names that the Houston Texans went after, what were your thoughts when the picks were in?
Well, when the picks were in and everything, when the dust settled, John, I was really surprised and I was happy about what the Houston Texans did. And I know that we're going to talk about the draft grades later on, but I think that what Nick Caserio did as far as the drafting was a much surprise, because after day 1, I know you and I both was like, okay, so what direction are you taking us in, Nick? If you're going to trade back and not get a draft pick, what direction are you taking us in? So I like what he did as far as the next 2 days. But I really like, John, you just mentioned the running back Woody Marks out of USC and his productions and what he was able to do. You still have the stat up. Did you say over 1,500 yards receiving?
Over 1,500 receiving yards for his career. A very productive running back out of the backfield with great hands.
Exactly. And so a couple of shows ago, you and I discussed what was going to be the next step in finding a replacement for Joe Mixon once his time is up with the Houston Texans. And we looked at, we talked about Damian Pierce. We talked about Dare Ugumawale. We even talked about British Brooks and Jawar Jordan and what they were going to be able to do. But, getting a running back like Woody Marks, and when you look at what he's able to do and what he gives the Houston Texans out of as far as being another piece in that offense of not just being able to run the ball, but being able to catch the ball as well. Something that we're hoping to see what Nick Caserio is going to be able to do with this offense. And don't get me wrong, because Joe Mixon ain't a bad pass catching back out of the backfield either. But I just like what they did by going out and drafting a guy, someone that they can develop. And when it's his time, once Joe Mixon is gone, it'll be his time. But John, that ain't what you wanted me to talk about, right? I don't want to talk about Graham Mertz because I don't know too much about him. I like David Carr as the backup. I mean, I don't know why you would go out and draft a quarterback. It just seems like something. It seems like you just add to the roster because
Davis Mills as a backup quarterback, right?
What did I say, Davis Mills?
You said David Carr, and please let's not get the Texan fans reminiscing on those bad days.
I'm sorry, and John, you know what? I meant Davis Mills, and I probably said David Carr because we were having a conversation over at NRG about when Nick Caserio was talking about need. He doesn't know what need is, and we were discussing that. No, what need is making sure your quarterback doesn't get hit throughout the season again, like CJ did last season, remnants of what happened to David Carr during his time with the Houston Texans. But John, I know what you're waiting on me to talk about, and I'm going to dive in it real quickly. You want to know why I like Jalen Smith, the cornerback out of USC. You want to know why?
Because when the pick happened, we text each other, guys, listeners and viewers. I said, hey, man, I didn't like that pick. I thought that was a prime opportunity for Houston to either get a young defensive tackle or invest more into the offensive line room, but they're comfortable in that area, but especially a D tackle. I thought there were better cornerbacks on the board. I thought there were, honestly, a linebacker on the board. Just better player overall, right? And so when that happened, I didn't like the move. Sarr said, hey, listen, I like the move. So I can't wait to hear you say why you like it.
I like the move because what you're doing is you're giving this young man an opportunity to develop behind one of the best cornerbacks in Derek Stingley Jr. and one of the upcoming cornerbacks in Kamari Lassiter. He gets to be on that team. And after talking to him, John, listening to him speak, this young man can tell you pretty much everything about the Houston Texans defensive backfield. He watched them. He studied them. And Kalen Bullock is his really good friend. They played together at USC. But you could just hear the competitiveness in his voice and how he's going to come in and fight for reps. And I think that he is also a player. When you have the type of player who is willing to do everything just in order to get on the field and willing to improve on his craft, his time at USC, most people may not have thought was the best. It may not have stood out like other cornerbacks did, but he did have a very productive season. I mean, a very productive time when he was at USC. But you also get a young man, John, who knows that he's not going to play, and who knows he's not going to start, but he's going to get some playing time, get some reps, and he's willing to play on special teams. One of the reasons why everybody loved Jalen Noel is because of what? He is willing to do everything plus play on the special teams. He doesn't have to get all his touches on wide receiver. He can be a special team. So Jalen Smith doesn't have to play every down at a defensive back position. He just wants to be on the field. And like I said, you can hear that competitiveness, that dog, that swarm mentality in his voice.
I think you're going to hear that out of every draftee. I thought the third round was extremely too high. He was a guy that was graded to be a 7th-round pick. And I thought at that point that was a perfect prime example. And I believe Houston traded up for him as well. So I thought that was an opportunity for Houston to go get another player that I'm not going to necessarily say a day one impact player, right? Around that area, around that time in the draft, you kind of got to find roles for players. But I don't see Smith getting on the field for Houston this year. I don't see him being more than a special teamer, which is great for Frank Ross. But they absolutely needed a D tackle or, again, maybe just some more protection for CJ Stroud, who was running for his life last year. Now, we look at finding gold on day 3. For me, guys, it's absolutely Woody Marks. I've been beating my chest and saying, listen, for Houston, the best thing for them to do is when you look at all of their top guys, Nico, Daniil, aside from CJ Stroud, Joe Mixon, right? Go find guys that when their time is coming to a near end, You got a guy already primed and ready to step up, step into that role, and take over. For Daniil Hunter, they already have it in Will Anderson. For Nico Collins, they went and drafted him in Jaden Higgins, and then the beauty of that is they'll be able to be paired together for a few seasons, right? But for Woody Marks coming in, I think number one, hey, listen, Dare, thank you, right? Everything you've done. But the competition right now, I think, is for Woody, Dare, and even Damian Pierce. Right. What Woody adds out of the backfield and how explosive he can be in open field. He ran a 4.5, so the speed isn't eye-popping, but in the open field, he can make some plays, right? Has great hands, has hands like a receiver. When you look at the offense that we think we're going to see, we always talk about quick passes and getting the ball out quickly. The running backs will be involved in it. And I think for Houston, they want to focus on kind of dialing back some of that wear and tear that they put on Joe Mixon this last year. So I love the Woody Marks move for the Houston Texans. And I'm going to be honest, Sarge, I don't know how you feel, so I'm going to ask you about Luke Lakely, the tight end out of Iowa. Right now, Houston has Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, Kate Stover, Irv Smith. That's a crowded tight end room now with Luke. But he does come in and he feels like he's a guy that can be molded in time to be a player that we're asking ourselves on Sundays, man, how long did Houston keep him stashed away? Because he's making plays. Yeah. So I did love him late in the draft for a seventh rounder.
Yes, and John, I'll tell you what. I'll give you what I think about Luke Longley after the break.
All right, let's dive into on the other side. We'll give our Texans draft grades, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about Big Luke out of Iowa.
There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, and when the demand is sky high, prices on the app actually go down. As tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I'm currently on the West Coast where the Houston Rockets are taking on the Golden State Warriors at the Chase Center, and I'll tell you what, there was a lot of people hovering around outside of the Chase Center still trying to get tickets, and I know that if they'd have went to that Game Time app, they could have saved up to 60% and got in and watched the Game 3 and Game 4. Save up to 60% off of buying last minute for sports concerts, comedy, theaters, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back, Battle Red Nation, to the Locked On Texas podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John, before I ask you to give Nick Caserio his report card, the Texans draft grade, I want to say this. You know, you just talked about earlier when I said that I like Jalen Smith out of USC, the cornerback out of USC, and him getting coming on to this team, and you said he's not going to get any playing time, but then you said that you like the tight end out of Iowa, and I'm saying to myself, okay, I get it. He's a big body. He may have went higher in the draft if he hadn't sustained some injuries. He was a really good tight end, but if your outlook on Jalen Smith is that he's not going to touch the field because of the people that are in front of him, how do you think Luke is going to get on the field? You're on mute.
My apologies. I don't have any expectation for Luke to get on the field this year. I think he'd be a great player for the Houston Texans to stash on their practice squad, right? 7th round pick, same kind of for Graham Mertz. Honestly, the same for Keontae Hamilton. Those were some extremely late round picks that I don't see them being having a role on this team. Honestly, that could change, right? We've heard all year competition in the offseason. So that could change, but a 7th rounder is viewed completely different than a 3rd rounder. And when I look at when Jalen Smith was taken, 2 picks later, Charles Grant out of William and Mary, the tackle, was taken. And then after that, when I look at some of the available defensive tackles that was taken, Deion Walker was available. Ty Robinson was available. So for me, it's just mainly looking at guys that 7th rounder, I like you in the potential, kind of like Brandon Hill a few seasons ago. We never got an opportunity to see it. But with Luke, maybe. But in the 3rd round, hey, there should be a shot or a chance there that you could actually compete for some meaningful snaps.
Yeah, and I understand exactly. So it isn't the player so much as the position, and the position he was. I mean, not the position, but where he was taken.
Yes, absolutely. The round for me, I thought the young man Jalen. And by the way, I don't know if the Houston Texans are playing some sick joke with the Rockets and drafting all these Jalen's. So they'll be the only ones with Jalen's that matter in Houston right now. But I thought that the 3rd round was too high. I thought that around that area you could still go get a productive player that you can possibly put out on the field. And for Smith, it doesn't feel like he'll make the field this year. Right? This is a crowded DB room. They have their cornerbacks that they are really proud of, that they really like. And I don't know if he beats out any of these guys. And I don't know if talent-wise, if he's ready to come into the NFL this year as a rookie. So I want to see him get there. I can't wait to see him get those reps and get those one-on-one battles in camp. But sorry, that was a reach for me, which plays a role into why I don't have Nick Caserio's draft grade as high as maybe others. It's still positive, but not as high as others.
Yeah. So with that being said, go ahead and give Nick his report card, John.
Well, this ain't one of them report cards where you gotta hand it to him face flat and say, "See me after class." Right? This ain't one of them. And then you wonder why your daddy walking through the door. What are you doing here? This is actually, I think, a decent draft for the Houston Texans. Right? I think that when you look at their first 3 picks, it kicked it all off. Right? And what they did was immediately attack positions of need. So I don't want to hear best player available. It was the best player available for the position of need. Throw that rest of that rhetoric out the window. Jaden Higgins, Ariante, who I can't wait to see. Does he play outside? Does he play inside? And Noel, those were guys that I think day one, either starters or impactful players. Throughout the draft, when you look at the rest of the back end of that draft, again, Woody Marks, Jaylen Reed, another contingency plan. CJ Gardner-Johnson, he's gone after 2 years. Right? Jimmy Ward, who's still on this roster, he won't be here. So you look at how Houston set themselves up in this draft. My B minus could very well be an A in a few years if we come back and revisit this draft. Once Houston has to move on from Joe Mixon. Once Houston has to move on from Gardner-Johnson. Once we see Ariante get a full shot at whatever his position will be in the growth in the NFL. Once we see Noel and Jaden Higgins, get into the NFL and learn how to win in situations that they didn't learn how to win in college. But I think a solid B minus for Nick Caserio and this draft is fair. And again, in a couple of years, it may be different. And I like that conversation of whether it be different or not. But because they set themselves up for the future down the line, that could very well, again, be an A for the Houston Texans.
John, I like your grade. I do. And I'm glad that Nick Caserio is not going to get in trouble for bringing his report card home. But I will say this. Let me say this. Man. And I'm glad that just says draft grade. Because as a draft grade, what was yours? A B plus?
I'm gonna say B minus.
B minus, right?
So this will be an 83, 82.
Yeah. So John, I'm not gonna even lie to you. I hate to say that I'm copying off your paper, but I have to say the same thing. I would say a B minus. And the reason why I say B minus is because I would have given him an A, but I don't like Graham Mertz. I just don't. I don't like them drafting a quarterback. at all. Period. I think that now, if you're talking about a waste of a draft pick, even though it was in the 6th round, that's still a waste of a draft
No
pick.
disputing
You
that
know,
for me.
and so I don't like that pick, and I think that that's what held me back from giving him an 8 was because of that pick right there. I do like Jaylen Reed, the safety out of Penn State, and them getting another option to be able to play with Kalen Bullock and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. And John, I'm going to tell you what. Like I said, if you remove the quarterback in the 6th round, I would have probably given him an A+ because, John, you and I. So do you remember the year was 1994-95? Do you remember who the NBA Rookie of the Year was in 94-95?
Is that Jason Kidd?
And it was co-rookies of the year.
Was it? And that's crazy because I was only 2 and 3 years old. Was
It's
it J.
Jason Kidd,
Kidd and Weber?
Grant Hill.
Grant Hill. My bad, Grant.
And so, exactly. So Jason Kidd and Grant Hill were the co-rookies of the year in 1994, 1995 in the NBA. The reason why I said that is because, John, I have to give us co-draft analyst of the year. And I would have given Nick an A+ because of this. I said, hey, man, in the first pick, they should go wide receiver.
You absolutely, you absolutely did.
They should go wide receiver with the first pick, right? I kept saying that over and over and over again. Hey, man, and I thought that it would have been day 1 and Matthew Golden, but since they didn't, okay. So in day 2, they started out and they picked Jaden Higgins, right? The reason why we're co-draft analysts of the year right here on the Locked On Texans podcast is because I picked the position. You pick the players. You have been very high on Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. Is it Noel or Noel?
I've been mispronouncing his name, so please forgive me, Jalen, whenever I get a chance to speak to you. I believe it's Noel.
No, okay. And so you've been talking about the wide receivers out of Iowa State. They should get both receivers out of Iowa State. And John, after that first day, hey, he had an A++++ because I also like Ariante Irsay out of Minnesota. So that first day had him at an A+, but then that third day took him back down to that B- area. So I just wanted to say that I like the draft. I like that he went out and he found the needs, even though he said he doesn't know what needs mean, but he went out and he found the needs. Maybe not so much the best players available, but the needs.
Yeah, and I want to bring that conversation back on the other side because I have, again, I'm not disputing with you on that at all. I thought that because day 2 for Houston was technically would be day 1 for Houston when they started to pick, because that was so good for Houston and they brought in players that we know for sure he's going to have a role on this team and that role would be here for a while. It made Houston's draft stock kind of skyrocket. So I'll come back on the other side to finish off my thoughts, and then we'll dive into what's next for Nick Caserio. The Nissan Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting the top pick from the Texans draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy who showcased the strength and power to push the Texans forward as we look ahead to next season. And that player is no other than Jaylen Noel, wide receiver, again, out of Iowa State. The Houston Texans love themselves some Cyclones at receiver. Listen, this guy has the opportunity and the ability to maybe be more of an X factor than Jaden Higgins. Just to be fair, the speed alone gives him that opportunity. He can play outside. He's dangerous on the inside, right? 7 touchdowns of 50 or more yards, big playability, right? And he's a QB's best friend. And now, a lot of times we look at players and we look at their height and their stature and we're like, we kind of take away from their impact. But this is the guy that bench pressed over 225, 20 times, right? So you look at a player that can handle the heavy duty, the ruggedness of the NFL, who can conquer the road with the capability and confidence, maybe have some, little man syndrome, who gets it done on a big stage, got it done on Saturdays. He'll now get it done on Sundays. That's wide receiver Jaylen Knowles. So dream big, go big. That's exactly what Jaylen can do for the Houston Texans. 20 yards down the field, first down. That's the type of player you're getting, Houston Texan fans. But when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Noel can do here. It's clear that the top pick for the Houston Texans draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Day 2 of us reviewing the Texans draft. But I want to let you guys know that for you making the Locked On Texans your first listen of the day, we got a special treat for you, because your second listen, you need to check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and the news never stops. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Sarge, you mentioned something, right? Like the back end of the draft wasn't exciting, questionable moves. You say Graham Hurts. I don't disagree. I say the cornerback, but really Graham Hurts and them not addressing the best player available at D tackle earlier in the draft. I think if somebody were to say a C plus, I wouldn't argue it. I wouldn't argue it. Mertz, Mertz, Hamilton, Lakey, those are guys that practice squad guys, right? And this is an organization that, since DeMeco Ryans has got here, has really valued developing guys, right? And so I do think the back end of the draft wasn't exciting. However, once you get to the 6th round, 7th round, you're kind of just picking guys that you like, and you don't have a real expectation that they could come in and create any competition at the position that they are drafted at. So I will say their first day, I thought that they did very well. I think that in between those mid rounds where Houston picked up Marks and Reed, I thought that those are 2 very good pickups. And again, everything for Houston for the 2025 draft, Sarge, for me, was an opportunity for them to hit on the players that they need now early and also be prepared for the future when those big contracts get to rolling around, right? When you got to give Will his money, when CJ is going to be prepared to break the bank. And that is something that you and I have talked about on this show all offseason.
Yeah, John, and I definitely agree with you. What I liked about what Nick Caserio did, and we have talked about this. We talked about how he has to be able to think in the future. And I think, you know what, as a matter of fact, John, after day 1, after the first round of the draft, I asked him, with acquiring these types of draft picks like he did earlier before the draft started and then trading back, I said, how much of that is what the fans and the media don't see about you trying to build this team for the future? And you have to put this team together for years to come and not just for right now. And the answer that he gave me was pretty much, that's what we're doing. That's what it always is. We always have to be thinking ahead. We always have to be looking ahead. And so outside of maybe the first 3 players that they drafted, I don't see anybody else on the team that could compete to become a day 1 starter. But everybody has a role. Everybody has a place. And when you look at what DeMeco Ryans loves, is he loves competition, and he loves players who are willing to give their all just to be able to get on the field. And it's just like you said, those contracts, when it's time for them to come, are going to be huge. Those contracts are going to be big for those star players that you want to retain on your team. And so all they did this draft, was just stockpiled players to put in position to get them into the system and get them ready. One thing that Nick has done with D'Amico being in Houston, since D'Amico's gotten to Houston, the last 2 years, and now including the draft, is he's put together pretty much like they have like a farm system, and they're getting some of these younger players in there, and they're developing them to be able to play on that next level. And so we asked the question, what's the next step, Nick? The next step is you've done the draft. Well, you've had the offseason and you acquired some free agents. You've had the draft. Now going into OTAs and training camp and the preseason, I feel like the next step for him, and he even spoke about it, is there's other ways to build teams. There's other way to put teams together outside of just the draft. He said everybody focuses so much on the draft, but there's other things that go along with building a team outside of the draft. He said, I like the draft. I get all the hype and everything. He said, but there's other ways that we can go in. There's going to be training camp, preseason. We can make trades with other teams. There's going to be cuts. And so I think that the next step now is for Nick to totally put his focus on what could potentially be out there for the Houston Texans once training camp is done.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I think that for the Houston Texans who are operating in, I don't want to say championship or bust mode, but I will say championship now mode, right? And that's something that CJ Gardner-Johnson echoed, right? He didn't come here to win no division, right? They came here to win a championship. So I think that is an amazing point, and I'm not going to not add to that by I want to piggyback to that by saying for Houston, they still have flexibility in next year's draft.
Yep.
I do wonder, I wonder how they still view this wide receiver room. I wonder if they feel like, okay, we got our guys that we scouted, we like, we love, they're in here. I don't know if we'll agree on this, but with the addition of Higgins and Noah, to me that screams Hutchinson and Mechie, you guys are on notice, and also for the future, I think Noah is an insurance policy for Tank Dell. But if there's a move to be made at the trade deadline to really get that unit over the hump, they have the flexibility in next year's draft to be able to make that move if they feel like this is a player that can get them over the hump. And by the way, man, a name that we haven't talked about a lot here on this show, but we have mentioned them. Where does Houston view Dalton Schultz still? I personally think that we're going to see a different version of him this upcoming year because he'll be doing things that he's comfortable with. But there is a buy-in process that I am curious to see how far bought in will Dalton Schultz be for this upcoming season. So I absolutely agree with you. Just viewing the rest of the league, looking at rosters, and for Houston, keeping an eye on guys that may become disgruntled, that teams may want to move off of because they're not where they want to be, and Houston can possibly afford those players to get them over the hump because, again, they are operating in a championship window.
Yep, and real quickly, John, maybe, and I haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet because we've just concluded the 2025 NFL draft. I need to go in and take a look at who's coming out in 2026 because they one of the reasons they may not have went so offensive line heavy is there may be a plethora of offensive linemen that will be coming out next year. I don't know that, but you also got to think that they're thinking about, are we going to extend Titus Howard or not? And if not, what is the contingency plan for that?
Yeah, good point. By the way, guys, Woody Marks, 1 fumble and over 600 carries. You're going to like him when he gets an opportunity to tote that rock. Thank y'all for watching this episode of the Locked On Texan podcast. Please be sure to just do 3 things, right? You know, look at it like day 1, day 2, and day 3 of the draft. Subscribe, like, and comment. And shout out to my boy who I met out there at the Black Man's Wellness event this past Saturday. We was getting it on with the running. So thank you for watching our show.
And make sure to follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with the Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gents and Texas fans across the world, peace. Go Rockets.
Yay.